Sarah moved to her 2-acre property in rural Tennessee in 2019 with zero plumbing experience, a $4,200 budget, and a single goal: she never wanted to pay a water bill again. 4 years later, she uses roughly 180 gallons of water a day. Her gardens are lush, her home is clean, her showers are hot, and her water bill is exactly $0 every single month. But here's the part that surprised everyone, including her. She did not dig a well. She did not connect to city infrastructure. She did not ask anyone for permission. She built what is now called the Rainwater Fortune system. And she is not alone. Tens of thousands of homesteaders, off-grid families, and suburban homeowners across the country have quietly built versions of this same setup. Some spending as little as $800, others spending $15,000, and almost all of them saying the same thing afterward: they wish they had done it sooner. This is the full story of how rainwater collection went from a fringe survivalist concept to one of the most practical, beautiful, and financially liberating systems a property owner can build. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how it works, what it costs, whether it is legal where you live, and what kind of water you can actually get from the sky. For the vast majority of human history, rainwater was not a backup plan. It was the plan. Every civilization that ever built something worth remembering figured out water collection early. The ancient Romans built elaborate cisterns beneath their homes that fed fountains, baths, and household use simultaneously. In Bermuda, rainwater collection was so fundamental to daily survival that the government mandated it in building codes as far back as the 1600s. In parts of rural India, the stepwell systems carved into the earth collected and stored monsoon rainfall that communities relied on for the entire dry season. This was not primitive. This was engineered, sophisticated, intentional, and deeply understood. Then came the 20th century, and everything changed. Municipal water systems expanded rapidly across the United States after World War II. Suburban development exploded. Developers needed a water hookup to sell a house, and water utilities needed customers to justify infrastructure expansion. The two interests aligned perfectly, and within a single generation, collecting the water that fell freely from the sky became something people simply stopped thinking about. Not because it stopped working, not because it became dangerous, but because it became invisible. Right now, the average American household pays between $70 and $150 per month for water service. That is $840 to $1,800 per year, every year, for the rest of your life, indexed to inflation, subject to rate increases, and entirely dependent on a utility company's infrastructure holding together. Between 2012 and 2022, municipal water rates in the United States increased by an average of 47%. In some cities, the increase was over 80%. Not because the water got better. In many cases, not even because the pipes got newer, just because the rates went up. Meanwhile, the rain kept falling. The average roof in the United States receives enough rainfall every single year to supply an entire household with water for daily use, garden irrigation, livestock, and emergency reserves combined. The water is already there. It falls on your property. It runs off your roof. It disappears into the storm drain. What the Rainwater Fortune system does is interrupt that disappearance. It catches the water before it leaves your land, filters it, stores it, and sends it wherever you need it to go. That is the whole idea. And it is almost embarrassingly simple once you see it laid out completely. Let's clear something up immediately, because there is a lot of confusion around this topic online. When most people hear rainwater collection, they picture a single rain barrel sitting under a downspout, half full of questionable brown water, covered in algae, with a faucet attached that barely dribbles anything out. That image is accurate for a lot of amateur setups, and it is the reason rainwater collection gets dismissed as a hobbyist project rather than taken seriously as a real water supply system. The Rainwater Fortune system is something completely different. It is a layered, filtration-forward, storage-integrated system designed to produce clean, reliable water at household volumes. It involves 4 core components working together: collection infrastructure, first flush diversion, multi-stage filtration, and storage and distribution. When all 4 of those components are properly sized and connected, you stop supplementing your water supply and start replacing it entirely. The key concept that separates functional rainwater systems from decorative ones is collection volume. Your collection volume is determined by 2 numbers. First, your roof's collection area, meaning the square footage of roof that is actively channeling water toward your system. Second, your local average annual rainfall, measured in inches. The math is straightforward. 1 inch of rain falling on 1,000 square feet of roof yields approximately 623 gallons of water. If you live in a region that receives 40 inches of rain per year, and your roof has 2,000 square feet of catchment area, you are generating roughly 49,840 gallons of water per year from rainfall alone. The average American household uses between 50 and 80 gallons of water per person per day. A family of 4 using 60 gallons per person daily consumes about 87,600 gallons per year. So, a 2,000 square foot roof in a 40-inch rainfall zone generates about 57% of a 4-person household's total annual water needs. Combine that with a secondary catchment, like a barn roof, a greenhouse, or a carport, and you close that gap entirely, with storage left over. In higher rainfall areas, like the Pacific Northwest, the Southeast, or the Midwest, families routinely design systems that generate 2 to 3 times their annual household demand. The excess goes into the garden, fills livestock troughs, or simply overflows safely into a secondary retention area. This is not a trickle. This is not a hobby. When properly built, this is a complete, functioning water supply system that operates on falling precipitation with no monthly bill attached to it. Every Rainwater Fortune system starts at the roof. Your roof is the collection surface. Its job is to catch rainfall and channel it efficiently toward the rest of the system. Most roofs already do a version of this through their gutter systems, but the average residential gutter setup is optimized for drainage, not collection. Its goal is to move water away from the structure as quickly as possible. Converting a drainage-focused gutter system into a collection-focused one requires 3 things. First, you need to audit your gutters for debris, slope, and capacity. Gutters clogged with leaves, pine needles, or organic matter will contaminate your collection water before it ever reaches your tank. Gutter guards, regular cleaning, and strategic trimming of overhanging branches are not optional maintenance. They are system performance requirements. Second, understand your roof material, because not all roofing is equal for water collection. Metal roofs, particularly standing seam steel or aluminum, are the gold standard. They shed water cleanly, do not leach chemicals, and do not grow moss or algae the way asphalt does. Asphalt shingles can be used, but the first year of collection from a new asphalt roof should be diverted away from potable storage while manufacturing chemicals off gas. Older asphalt roofs that have weathered for several years are generally fine. Clay tile, slate, and metal are all excellent. Third, and most critically, you need a first flush diverter on every downspout feeding your system. When rain falls on a dry roof, the first few gallons of runoff carry everything that accumulated on that surface since the last rain. Bird droppings, dust, pollen, air pollution particulate, insect debris, the concentrated residue of weeks or months of ambient exposure. A first flush diverter is a pipe assembly that automatically captures and holds that initial dirty runoff, typically the first 2 to 10 gallons per 100 square feet of roof surface, and diverts it away from your main collection line. Only after that initial contaminated flow has been captured does the cleaner rainfall route into your storage system. The basic gravity-fed version uses a standpipe that fills from the bottom up. When full, water overflows into the main collection line. The standpipe slowly drains between rain events through a small calibrated hole, resetting itself automatically for the next rainfall. Every downspout feeding your system needs one. On a typical home with 4 downspouts, that means 4 diverters, each sized to capture the first 10 gallons of runoff. It is 15 minutes of plumbing work per diverter, and it is the difference between clean water entering your system and a storage tank that gradually becomes a biological incubator over a single season. This is the section that determines whether your rainwater system produces water you can actually drink, or just water you can use for irrigation. Both are valuable, but the difference in filtration complexity and cost is significant. So it is important to understand which outcome you are designing toward before you start building. For non-potable uses, including garden irrigation, toilet flushing, outdoor washing, and livestock watering, minimal filtration is required. A basic sediment screen at the collection inlet and a coarse filter before the distribution pump will produce water that is completely safe for all of those applications. For potable use, meaning water you drink, cook with, or bathe in, you need a multi-stage filtration approach. The chain has 4 stages. First, a sediment pre-filter after the first flush diverter removes large particles, leaves, insects, and debris before the water reaches your storage tank. Second, the storage tank itself functions as an active system component. It must be opaque to prevent algae growth, completely sealed to keep insects and debris out, and fitted with inlet and outlet screens that maintain that sealed environment while allowing controlled water flow. Third is activated carbon filtration. Water drawn from the storage tank passes through a carbon filter before any household use. Carbon removes heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, volatile organic compounds, and a wide range of taste and odor issues. If your catchment area is near agricultural land, industrial activity, or heavy traffic corridors, this stage is non-negotiable for potable applications. Fourth, for drinking and cooking water specifically, you need either reverse osmosis or ultraviolet sterilization, or both. Reverse osmosis pushes water through a membrane that removes dissolved solids, bacteria, viruses, and heavy metals. UV sterilization destroys the DNA of microorganisms as water passes through a UVC lamp chamber. UV does not address chemical contaminants, which is why it follows carbon filtration rather than replacing it. Together, carbon plus UV covers the full spectrum of biological and chemical contamination concerns for most rainwater sources in the continental United States. What does this actually cost? A sediment pre-filter runs $30 to $80. A quality whole house carbon filter housing with cartridges runs $80 to $150 up front and $30 to $60 per year in replacement cartridges. An under-sink reverse osmosis system runs $200 to $500. A UV sterilization unit runs $100 to $400 depending on flow rate. Total potable filtration chain, $400 to $1,100 up front, with $50 to $150 per year in ongoing maintenance. Compare that to $840 to $1,800 per year in municipal water costs, and the math becomes obvious very quickly. Storage is where most first-time builders get the sizing wrong, and they almost always err on the side of too small. The goal of storage is not to hold today's rain. The goal is to buffer you through your region's dry season, whatever that looks like where you live. In the Pacific Northwest, where summer months are genuinely dry despite the region's rainy reputation, a well-designed system needs enough storage to carry a household from late June through mid-October with no significant rainfall input. That is roughly 110 days. A family of 4 using 60 gallons per person per day needs about 26,400 gallons of storage capacity to ride out a Seattle summer completely independently. A single 5,000-gallon poly tank costs between $1,500 and $2,500 new. 6 of those tanks connected with a simple manifold gives you 30,000 gallons of storage for $9,000 to $15,000 in tank costs alone. That is a one-time capital investment that collects interest every time it rains for the next 30 years. The 3 main tank types used in residential rainwater systems are above-ground poly tanks, buried poly cisterns, and corrugated steel tanks. Above-ground poly tanks are the most common entry point. Available in sizes from 250 gallons to over 10,000 gallons per tank. They are UV stabilized for outdoor exposure and completely food safe when rated for potable water use. The main aesthetic objection is real, but it is easily addressed with wooden enclosures, stone surrounds, earthwork berms, or strategic placement behind outbuildings. Buried cisterns are the premium option for both aesthetics and performance. An underground tank maintains consistent year-round temperature, preventing algae growth and keeping water fresher longer. It is invisible from the surface, takes up no above-ground space, and in freeze-prone climates, it protects your water supply through a hard winter. Installed costs for a buried 5,000-gallon cistern typically run $3,000 to $8,000, depending on soil conditions and local labor rates. Corrugated steel tanks are increasingly popular in the aesthetic homesteading community because they look genuinely intentional. They have a distinctly agricultural, industrial chic appearance that photographs well, ages gracefully, and fits naturally on properties with a working farm or rural aesthetic. Lined interior versions are safe for potable water use, and sizes run from 1,500 to over 50,000 gallons. Distribution comes in 2 forms: gravity-fed and pump pressurized. A gravity-fed system is the simplest possible approach. If your storage tank is elevated above your use points, water flows downhill by gravity without any pump required. Gravity-fed systems are silent, electricity-free, and essentially zero maintenance. The trade-off is pressure. You will get usable flow, but not the 40 to 80 pounds per square inch that most household fixtures and appliances expect. For full household pressure, you need a pump. A quality pressure tank, an inline pump assembly, takes your storage output and pressurizes it to standard household specifications for $500 to $1,500 in equipment. Combined with a solar panel and charge controller, the entire pump system can operate completely off-grid for under $2. $0 in total equipment cost. This is the part of the video that the internet gets wildly wrong in both directions. You will find content claiming that rainwater collection is illegal everywhere in the United States. That is not true. You will also find content claiming it is universally legal with no permits ever required anywhere. That is also not true. The actual legal landscape is nuanced, state-specific, and significantly more permissive than most people assume, but it requires doing your homework before you build. Texas is one of the most rainwater-friendly states in the country. Texas law not only allows rainwater collection, but actively encourages it through tax exemptions on collection equipment. There are no restrictions on volume and no permit requirements for residential systems. Texas even has a formal Bill of Rights for rainwater harvesters. Colorado, historically one of the most restrictive states, significantly loosened its regulations in 2016. Residents may now collect up to 110 gallons in no more than 2 55-gallon containers for outdoor use. This is not a whole home supply solution under current Colorado law, but the regulatory trend has been toward continued loosening. California allows rainwater collection for outdoor irrigation with no permit required. For indoor potable use, a permit is required but obtainable. California also actively promotes rainwater reuse systems as part of its drought response framework. Oregon requires a water use permit for rainwater collection from any surface other than a rooftop. Rooftop collection for residential use is permitted without a permit, and the distinction matters because it determines whether ground-level catchment systems are legal in addition to roof-guttered ones. Washington, Arizona, Hawaii, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and most of the Southeast have no meaningful restrictions on residential rooftop rainwater collection. The states requiring most careful research are those governed by prior appropriation water law, primarily Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. Prior appropriation holds that water rights belong to whoever historically claimed them first, not necessarily whoever owns the land the water falls on. In practice, most residential systems operate completely under the radar of prior appropriation enforcement, and many Western states have carved out explicit exemptions for small residential collection. But in those 3 states specifically, understand the framework before building at scale. The practical summary: collecting rainwater from your own roof for your own use on your own property is legal and largely unregulated in most states. For potable indoor use integrated with your home's plumbing, you may need a permit, and that permit is generally obtainable. Call your county health department. In most cases, you will find either no restrictions or requirements that are reasonable and achievable. Let's talk about money, because this is where the system either makes sense for your situation or it does not. There are 3 levels of system investment, and they correspond to 3 different goals. Level 1 is the garden and outdoor supply system. Collection setup with 500 to 2,500 gallons of storage, a basic sediment filter, and a simple gravity-fed distribution system for irrigation and non-potable outdoor use. Budget: $500 to $2,500. If you are currently spending $30 to $80 per month on irrigation water, this system pays for itself in 12 to 36 months and operates at zero marginal cost afterward. Level 2 is the partial household supply system. 5,000 to 15,000 gallons of storage, a full multi-stage filtration system for potable quality water, and a pressure pump for household distribution. You remain connected to municipal water or a well as a backup, but your rainwater system handles 50 to 80% of total household water use. Budget: $5,000 to $15,000. 000. Payback period on water savings is typically 5 to 10 years. Level 3 is the full independent system. No municipal connection. No well. Complete rainwater supply for a household with 20,000 to 50,000 gallons of storage, a full potable filtration chain including UV sterilization, and a pressurized pump system with solar power backup. Budget: $15,000 to $45,000. These systems are built for permanent, full-time use with no other water source and last 20 to 40 years with proper maintenance. A family spending $120 per month on water saves $1,440 per year after switching to a functional rainwater system. Over 30 years, accounting for continued rate increases, that household saves between $65,000 and $110,000 in water costs. A $30,000 system that returns $65,000 to $110,000 over its service life is a sound capital investment by any reasonable measure. Beyond the utility savings, a property with a proven rainwater system and full storage infrastructure commands a meaningful premium in rural land markets over comparable parcels without it. And in the aesthetic homesteading community, a well-designed system with corrugated steel tanks surrounded by native plantings does not look like a survival setup. It looks like intentional, sophisticated land stewardship, and that communicates value in ways that show up directly in asking prices. The Rainwater Fortune system is not a theoretical concept. It is a functioning reality for tens of thousands of households right now. In Central Texas, there is an entire regional culture of rainwater harvesting that is well documented by the Texas Water Development Board. What started as agricultural irrigation applications has become a standard option for new rural construction. Builders in the Texas Hill Country routinely price rainwater infrastructure as a standard line item alongside well drilling, because in a region with inconsistent aquifer access and limited municipal supply options, it is simply the practical choice. In the Pacific Northwest, a growing community of aesthetic homesteaders has integrated rainwater systems into permaculture-designed properties, where every element of the landscape is engineered to slow, spread, and sink water before it leaves the land. On these properties, the rainwater storage tanks are often the visual centerpiece, elevated on timber frames, surrounded by food forest plantings, and connected to gravity-fed drip irrigation systems feeding raised beds and orchards. They look like intentional infrastructure rather than an afterthought. In Hawaii, where municipal water rates are among the highest in the country and rainfall is abundant on the windward sides of all the major islands, rainwater collection is standard practice on rural properties. The state's Department of Health has published detailed public guidance on building potable rainwater systems that meet health standards without requiring any municipal connection, a formal acknowledgement that the system works at household scale. The aesthetic homesteading community has contributed something important to how rainwater collection is now perceived and adopted more broadly. These are not people building utilitarian gray boxes and calling it done. These are people who care deeply about how their land looks, how their systems photograph, and how their infrastructure communicates their values. The result has been a genuine design evolution in rainwater system aesthetics, with handcrafted first flush assemblies, timber frame tank enclosures, integration with herb gardens and pollinator plantings, and careful documentation of the building process shared widely across social media platforms. When the system looks beautiful, people stop asking whether it is practical and start asking how to build one. And that is exactly the right question. Because what the Rainwater Fortune system ultimately represents is not just a way to reduce a utility bill, although it does that convincingly. It represents something that no utility company can offer: genuine sovereignty over one of your most fundamental needs. Water is not a convenience. It is the baseline requirement for every living thing on your property, every food crop in your garden, every animal in your care, and every person in your home. When you control your water, you control your future in a way that no financial product or policy arrangement can replicate. The rain does not require a subscription. It does not send rate increase notices. It does not go offline when the grid fails, or the infrastructure ages past its service life, or the utility company decides your neighborhood is not a priority for the next capital improvement cycle. It just falls. Every single year, reliably, freely. All you have to do is build the system to catch it. What you have just watched is the complete framework for understanding, designing, and beginning to build a rainwater collection system that can meaningfully change what your property costs and what it is capable of. You now understand the collection math, the filtration chain, the storage sizing logic, the legal landscape by state, the real investment numbers at all three system levels, and the long-term financial return on a well-built system. The next step is site-specific. Pull up your roof plan, measure your catchment area, look up your region's average annual rainfall, and run those first collection volume calculations. The numbers will either confirm that rainwater is a viable primary supply for your property, or they will show you exactly how much storage you need to make it work year-round. Either way, you are working with real information instead of guesswork. If you want the detailed breakdown of how to build the specific filtration stages covered in this video, including exact component recommendations and the full cost matrix across all three system levels, that video is on screen right now. And if this kind of deep, practical, no shortcut content is what you are looking for on your homesteading journey, hit subscribe. This channel covers the full picture of what sustainable self-reliance actually looks like when you build it right.